In a world that's loud, the church does not have to remain silent. In a world that's dark, the church can shine God's light. Welcome to Light Talks, where we dive deep into real conversations, not just echoing the world's noise, but shedding God's light on challenging topics. Let's talk.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Light Talks. Thanks for being here today. And today we have back, by popular demand, Dr. Brandon Steenbock. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, glad to be here.
We heard a lot of great feedback on our talk last time, so we wanted to have you back. I know there's a lot to say when it comes to marriage and parenting, which our last episode was on. But today we're going to talk about specifically marriage.
Just marriage, one of my favorite topics.
Awesome. And because of that, we also have with us in studio, Allie Novak.
Hey.
Allie, if you don't know, is the brains behind Light Talks. So she's the one who organizes this. She tells me what to say, and I say it. And
no, he doesn't really say.
No, she's been behind helping organize all the conversations and talk. So we're going to bring her on here as a female voice, especially in a conversation about marriage.
Yeah.
But you're also going to see more of Allie as she's going to jump into and talk about topics that really I think would be good for you to host on. So we're going to kind of co-host. You're going to see both of us from time to time. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And being the person to talk about marriage with a bunch of dudes.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Sounds pretty exciting.
We'll see how this goes. So there is so much to talk about when it comes to marriage. We could have week-long seminars. There can be counseling appointments that could go on for months and months and months. There's just so much to talk about. And they do. Because marriage can be a hard topic. There's a lot of aspects to it. But I think what we want to do today is just see where the conversation goes.
Okay.
We have a couple main kind of big topics we want to hit. And we might have so much to talk about that we might say, cut, there's the end of part one. And then make a second episode on this and just keep going because there's just so much good stuff to talk about.
Yeah,
so
sounds like a blast. Let's do it.
So let's jump into it.
Yeah.
You ready?
Let's go.
All right. So the first thing we wanted to talk with you about, Brandon, we know that you deal with a lot of newlywed couples, people that are getting ready for marriage that are engaged. And you have like a pre-marriage counseling seminar that maybe you do with couples.
Yeah.
Like to prepare them for marriage. So maybe let's start out as people are entering into marriage. What do they not know that they're going to find out really soon? Like, when I can think back when I was engaged, it's going to be flowers and butterflies and just the most wonderful thing. And then you kind of get into marriage. You're like, oh, marriage is hard.
Yeah, it is.
So what is maybe some of the things that you try to really prepare new couples that are going to get married, like to get them ready for marriage?
I mean, one of the biggest things, right, is that we spend how many dozens, sometimes even like hundreds of hours planning the wedding day. Right? So that everything is perfect. And I often will ask couples kind of in the first session, I'll say, so how many hours do you think you're going to spend planning your wedding day? And they'll throw out some kind of wild ballpark figure. And then I'll say, how many hours do you plan on spending after your wedding day working on your marriage together?
Ooh.
And they immediately just kind of stop and they look and they're like, we have never even thought about that.
Correct. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so I think, that's probably the first thing that I want couples to think about as they enter into marriage is you aim at the wedding day, but you got to aim way past that, right? Because the wedding day is just one day. If you're aiming at a 50, 60, 70-year marriage, there's a lot of days there. Yeah. So you need to be prepared for all of the days that are to come. A lot of times I think couples can be, like you said, they're kind of idealistic. Maybe, they've got kind of the pie in the sky, kind of just like, oh, this is going to be wonderful. Everything's going to be awesome. We're going to get married and every day is going to be amazing. And we're just going to be so in love. And the most successful couples are the ones who are like, yeah, we know it's going to take work.
Yeah.
But what I do with a lot of couples for that pre-marriage phase is take them through a couple assessment. I think that's really powerful, where they actually will go online. There are a couple of cool tools for that, a couple of companies that have created these things. And we'll have them fill out the questionnaire. It's kind of fun, actually, because it's a little bit like if you've ever done like a Facebook poll, like find out which Disney princess you are or something like, by the way, John, which Disney princess are you? Do you know?
Probably. No, I have no.
Yeah, I think it told me that I was Elsa once, but I'm not sure why. But
yeah.
I think it's because I'm tall. I don't know.
It could be.
Yeah. But the couple assessment is a fun opportunity really for them because they get to, answer all these questions about the relationship. And people like talking about themselves. So then they like finding out about themselves. What it does is it matches up their answers and creates a picture of where is your relationship today. And the cool thing is it uncovers where they're really strong as a couple. Like, what do you actually have going for you that's going to make this a successful marriage, but also where do you need to work together? And so then that's my pre-marriage method with them, is actually to go through counseling sessions with them, kind of one at a time, going through the places where they need to grow, saying, let's have the hard conversations. Let's open the door to talking about, how do you communicate? How do you have conflict? Have you ever actually seen each other angry? And
Yes.
what's that like?
Yeah.
And just all of the things that they need to address. So we work through, doing a budget sheet together so that they actually know how to get on the same page with their money, and how are you going to deal with your in-laws, and what's going to happen when the kids come along, and all of those things. So when it comes to what are couples today like struggling with, what do they come in the door with? I'm going to say that honestly, there's a lot of uncertainty for couples today. Entering into marriage, because they've kind of been told by kind of society, maybe even by their parents, to like wait until you know that you're ready. Wait until you have everything done, right? Wait until you have got your education down and you've got your career in order, and maybe even have like the nest egg for the house, and make sure that you've traveled enough so that you've really seen the world, and make sure that you have experienced everything that life has to offer, because once you get married, that stuff's going to not be able to happen, right? And then they're saying, well, am I ready? Like, have I really done this right? Are we in the right place for this? So that's been a challenge.
Do you have an opinion on that? Do you think they should wait? Or do you think like dive right in if they're ready? Like,
yeah.
Do you have an opinion?
I do. My opinion, and most parents hate it when I say this because I say this to young people all the time, don't wait. If you know that person and you're like, this person ticks the boxes, and make sure you have a good criteria. Like, I always kind of say, make sure the person, loves Jesus, is leading you closer to Jesus, and they make you feel safe, and they bring out the best in you, right? If those things are true and you're like, I think I'm going to marry this person someday, why wait, right? You look back in history, and a couple of generations ago, man, people would get married at age like 19, 20.
Yeah.
Really young.
And then they'd get the crappy starter house, and they would, scrape by eating beans and rice and tuna fish. And then those are the people who are like 60, 70 years of marriage. And they're the ones who are, when they do the dance at the wedding, where it's like, sit down if you've only been married this many years. And finally it's like grandma and grandpa, great grandma and grandpa. They've got 72 years. And then when somebody says, how did you make it? They say, it was hard, but we just held on to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? They built a foundation for life out of their marriage, versus what's happening today. And there's some good research on this about kind of how the age of first marriage has just been climbing up.
Mm-hmm.
And they're calling it the capstone model of marriage, where it's like, I've built my entire life, and now the trophy at the top is I find somebody to share it with.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the problem with that. If you've built your entire life so you're totally independent, you don't need another person in your whole life, then why are you even getting married? Like, what's the point anymore, right? It's just to add somebody in, and maybe you get to share a little bit, but there's actually a sense that people have that marriage becomes almost redundant. Like, this other person is they're just there for me, but not to help me with life, just to make my life feel a little better, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is that it actually leads to intense pressure to meet some kind of a vague, ambiguous need that you don't even know what it is, right? Like, imagine being a young man who's like, I'm marrying this girl who needs nothing from me, right? I'm not going to be her provider. She's got a fantastic career. I'm not going to be her protector. She's totally independent. I'm not going to be her emotional support. She's already got an emotional support system. I'm not going to be anything for her. Right? I'm just here. So I have to find all these other things that I can provide for her. And that's why I think a lot of guys get scared about it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of young men who are like, I'm just not sure what can I do? How can I even add any value to this person's life? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that like, you need to get married because like I need this person, right?
Yeah.
But that you want to build a life together where there's a oneness. And how do you create that if you're already 100% yourself?
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot. So I was married when I was 21. My husband was 20. We started dating in high school, and we had dated for 6 years already. And I was in my final year of college. He proposed in August, and we were married by January because we were at the point of like, why are we waiting? I think his parents had an idea of like, oh, you'll be engaged for a few years. You can get a job. You can find a house, right? That model that you talked about. But we were ready to just like start our lives together and figure it out. It wasn't easy. We lived in my parents' basement for 6 months for the first 6 months of our marriage. It was, ask my husband. It was awesome. It was their wedding gift to us. So while I finished college, they provided that for us.
Yeah.
And it was beautiful. But it was great then when we were able to find a rental outside of that.
Yeah. I've known some couples that had to kind of do that, and it's mixed reviews about living with your parents after you get married. Yeah. I understand that can be, it can be a blessing. It can be also be a challenging thing.
Yeah, my parents were super respectful, and they actually built a basement apartment for us. So we had all of our own amenities. So they were awesome in that sense where they gave us our space.
Can I ask, were your parents then, I mean, it sounds like they were really supportive of your marriage as a young person getting married, right?
Yeah.
John, how old were you guys when you got married?
We were 23.
Okay. Yeah. And I was, I think I was just turned 23 and my wife is almost 21 when we got married. And so we were pretty young too. And our families were supportive of that. We had a supportive community. And this is what's interesting. If you read some research, what people will say is that your best chance of a lifelong marriage is getting married after age 25 because you know who you are and you've got everything together and all of that sort of thing. And that's what the research says. And it's true statistically if you just look at it in raw numbers, compare everybody, who's most likely to stick it out are the people who are over the age of 25. But if you actually take and sort the data a little bit, and the National Marriage Project did this a couple of years ago, they sorted that data and said, but what are the things for the people over age 25 that do make it? What are the things that they have in common with people under 25 that make it? And they found out that things like your parents are in support of your marriage. You have a faith community that's surrounding you and supporting you and believes in you. You have a strong conviction that this marriage is to last forever. You have some intentionality about continuing to grow after you get married. And what they found was actually the people who have the best chance of sticking with it are not over age 25, once you sort all that data. It's the people age 22 to 24 who have all of those other things built up underneath them as well. So kind of right where we're sitting at this table, we're right in that zone for the best chances of a lifelong marriage, provided we have all those other things around us as well. It sounds like, I mean, you did. You as well, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to talk for a little bit on this point because we're talking about getting engaged, choosing a lifelong partner. Two thoughts came to mind. Number one, I want to get your take on this. I've heard it said that when you get married when you're in your 20s, you tend to choose a mate who complements you. So someone who maybe has some gifts and qualities that you don't have. You see it as a completion of yourself. If you're not outgoing, you might choose a more outgoing person. Things like that. When you get married later in life, like when you're in your 30s, people seem to pick more a lifelong mate that is more like them. So they are not as outgoing. They kind of pick someone who's also not as outgoing, or that this person really loves movies because I really love movies. You know, you start to maybe choose someone who's much more similar to you that you have common interests, so you know you can do things together. I'm not citing any research. I'm just citing an observation that some people have made.
Some people have observed this. Yeah, I've read the same observation, and I guess I've never really looked at data or research that really suggests that. I guess it's probably out there. There's a lot of research and data you can find.
Yeah,
and you can use that to prove just about anything. But I think there's probably some truth to the idea that if I've created for myself this like totally independent life, and now I'm going to add a person into it, I'm probably more likely to find somebody who's going to just find it easy to slide right on into the daily patterns that I have, right? Which means I am going to find somebody who's a lot more like me. But then there's that redundancy thing that I said before, right? Where there's no thought to what do I actually need in life? Like what would a partner in life actually help me to bring out the best in me be like? What are the complementary gifts that they bring? And like you said, when you're younger and you're looking for somebody, you recognize I don't have it all together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have my whole life together all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to work on it. And if I'm willing to work on it with another person and we're willing to be intentional about growing together, then yeah, we might find ourselves coming at it from opposite things. My wife and I are so completely different.
That's what kind of what I was just gonna say is when those of us who are married, you start to see, wow, this person is a lot different. And I think you start to realize that as you get further into marriage. You don't really maybe realize that when you're dating. But I'm bringing this up because if you're dating or if you're thinking about marriage, I would love to just plant that seed into the minds of those who are considering this because I never thought about that. I never thought that what attracted me to Erin was that she was different.
Sure.
And why I was attracted to that because I saw it as she brings a completion to me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, later in life, it's like she just wants to travel and see the world. I'm like, I've traveled enough. I could just sit at home and be completely content. We're different in those ways. It's not bad.
Yeah.
But I never saw that until I got further into my marriage. And when someone mentioned it, I'm like, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. So
have you guys done the Strengths Finder thing?
Yes, that was eye-opening.
Have you done that with your spouse?
I haven't done that with my husband yet. No.
Okay.
It was a big, that's why you are the way that you are
Yes.
moment. So like, that's why you think the way that you do.
Yeah.
It really was huge.
Yeah. My wife and I, we found out our kind of complementary strengths years ago, but we've just started reading this book called Strengths-Based Marriage, which kind of just, it sort of forces you to think about this a little bit deeper. And, my wife and I are finding she's got discipline and consistency in her top 5. And she is just like, she will eat the same thing for breakfast every day and feel good about it.
Yes.
She will get out and run 3 times a week, no matter what the weather, no matter how she feels, she's out there doing it. Well, discipline and consistency are my numbers 33 and 34. They're on the very bottom of the stack for me.
Yes. Yep. Same for us.
But I'm intellection and ideation. I get stuck in my head and I think about ideas and stuff like that. And I'll try to share those things with her. And those are way down on the list for her. So I'm starting like, what I just thought about? Can I tell you about this weird theory about why time travel could be possible in God's world? And she's like, what are you talking about?
No, you can't tell me.
What? No, I'm not interested in this.
Future episode with Brandon, time travel.
Yes. I love it.
So I want to dive into marriage soon, but as you coach these couples before they get married, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that they have that you find?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that they'll find it just natural to kind of just flow into married life, right? That because we love each other, because we enjoy each other's company now, then it's going to just feel natural to just be married. Now, part of that probably is, and I'll just be honest, 3 out of 4 couples that come into my office to get married are already living together. And because of that, they're already kind of doing married life. And so sometimes the misconception is that something is going to just magically change about their relationship in some way, that they're going to somehow feel more committed because they got married. And then my experience in working with them later on is that they feel a little bit like, well, I don't really know exactly what changed. Or even in that pre-marriage conversation, I'm asking the question, well, what's going to change when you get married? And they're kind of looking at each other going, I guess I'm not really sure. And there's a problem, right? Because that reveals a lack of kind of like, what's the thoughtfulness behind this? Like, what are we really aiming at here? Yeah, that's one of the biggest misconceptions.
I think one thing I was thinking of, which is also applies to those wanting to get married, but then once you are married, I remember Pastor Bill in a marriage seminar that we did at our church. My wife and I went to it, and I recommend anyone who's married to just go to marriage seminars every now and then, and hear things that maybe you haven't thought about, and just fine tune your marriage. But he said a lot of people think of marriage as a 2-way covenant, but he said he would more accurately describe it as 2 one-way covenants.
That's a good
You're
way to
promising to love this person no matter what. And I think maybe that's a misconception I see, is that people think kind of part of the promise is that they're going to love me. That's kind of what they're going into a marriage. I'm going to feel loved by this person. But you almost have to step up to the table and say, I'm going to love this person even when they're not loving me.
Yes.
And they're committing to do the same thing to love me even when I'm not loving them. When you view marriage that way, kind of changes how you walk into basically all the topics that we're here to discuss.
I think that highlights another one of the things that I do see among young couples, in that pre-marriage phase, is the sort of the belief that it is sort of transactional, and that as long as I'm being fed, as long as I'm happy, as long as this person is providing for me, it's going to be easy for me to give back to them. But as soon as that stops, then, well, that's when the issues will arise. And it's always kind of this, like, I'm just waiting for the other person to act for me, right? And so a lot of times we'll go into that Ephesians 5:34 passage where it says, that husbands must love their wives and wives must respect their husbands. Well, it doesn't say love her when she's being lovable.
Correct.
Right?
What, are you sure? Let me just double check that.
Always lovable. I just want to clarify.
Always lovable, yes.
I'll talk to your husband about that sometime.
Let's ask him.
But the truth is, it's really easy to love somebody who's being lovable.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Super easy. It's not so easy to love somebody when they're being unlovable. And yet, like, that's what the essence of real love is, did I love this person unconditionally? Did I look past the hurt or look past the unlovableness and say, yeah, no, I'm still there for you, right? The same is true with the respect then, right? John, have you ever been an unrespectable husband?
Well, going in the same vein here, of course I have every single minute.
There are lots of times I've done stupid, foolish,
absolutely.
even hurtful things.
I'm a total idiot. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there are times where I look at my actions and I'm like, of course it would be hard for my wife to respect me in this situation. But when she turns around and says, I still respect you, that hasn't changed, and she shows that, man, suddenly I feel like I can take on the world because I know she's got my back. And so that unconditional love and respect is something that a lot of times just it's not in the mind of somebody entering into marriage day one, because they feel it already. And I just want to be clear. It's not that they're thinking, I don't have to give unconditional love and respect. They would never say that. But it's that they're not thinking there are going to be days where this person's going to be unlovable because they're just so in love right now.
Yeah.
They're not thinking there's going to be days where they're unrespectable because they're like, I think the world of this person. Yeah. And so it's helping them to realize that there are going to be days where you're going to look at each other across the table and you're going to go, why did we even do this whole marriage thing?
Yeah. Which usually happens to most couples at some point.
Yeah, usually around between 5 and 7 years.
Yeah, you're like, was this the right choice? Yeah. Everyone has that.
And at that moment, they have to be able to look at each other and say, but we made a promise.
Yeah.
There's a great line in Andrew Peterson's song called Dancing in the Minefields, where he says, I guess that's what the promise is for. Because he's talking about how hard marriage has been. Yeah. And he says, I guess that's what the promise is for. Like, you made a promise, not because it was going to be easy, but because it was going to be hard. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so hang on to that promise, live by that promise, put it into practice, show that unconditional love and respect.
Yeah, isn't that the promise that God has made to us too, and how he treats us?
Yeah.
When we're unlovable, he loves us, and he's asked us to do the exact same thing, which is not easy. Yeah. It's hard.
It's not our natural instinct at all. We have to choose that in advance to make that decision. And God is he's a great example of how to do that.
It takes humility. Mm-hmm. It really takes humility to look at yourself and say, that was not okay. Whatever it was, or I'm not loving you very well. I'm sorry. That takes humility to do that.
Yeah. On our wedding day, when our pastor was giving his little sermon before we said our vows, he had my husband and I, Jake and I, look at each other. And he said, repeat after me. And we're like, well, this isn't our vows yet. What are we doing? And he said the words, I will hurt you. And so we had to say that back to each other. Yeah. And at first we looked at him like, this is a wedding. But it actually has been such a great foundation of our marriage, because when we screw up, I remember that moment. I don't remember anything else from our ceremony besides that moment. Yeah. My husband never promised that he was going to be perfect. Yeah. He promised that he would hurt me on day one. So now I need to turn around and figure out how to forgive and move forward. Like, he never made the promise to be perfect in the first place.
Yeah, that reminds me, Professor Kloxine, we went to college when he was a biology professor. For some reason, I remember him saying in biology class, just on his wisdom tangents, he said, your spouse will be the person that you will sin against the most in your life.
Oh, yeah.
And your spouse will be the person that you will have to forgive the most in your lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually, my grandparents, when they celebrated their 65th wedding anniversary, my grandpa was a pastor, and I had asked him, could you tell me what advice you would give to a young couple who's about to get married after 65 years of marriage? And I was thinking about it in terms of, hey, I can bring this into my pre-marriage counseling. And I called him on the phone, and he said, let me get back to you. And it was like 2 days later, he sent me this really long email, and it was all about forgiveness. And it was all about the fact that you had to practice forgiveness. And right away, as I looked at it, he talked about how he had to forgive my grandma and she had to forgive him. And right away, I had to call grandma and be like, this doesn't make sense because I'm pretty sure you're perfect, grandma. And why would grandpa ever have to forgive you? Like, it doesn't make sense. And she just said, oh, Brandon. But no, really, like, that idea of building this culture of forgiveness in your marriage. There's a researcher by the name of John Gottman, and he's researched marriages for 4 decades. He was a professor at University of Washington in Seattle. They actually set up an apartment building that had like furnished apartments, and they would invite couples to come and stay so that they could study them. He called it the Love Lab. And they would have all of these counseling sessions and interviews with his research team, and they were researching marriages to find out what makes happy marriages strong, what makes failing marriages fail, all of those things. And in one of his books, he actually writes that most marriage therapy is worthless. It was really kind of surprising. I was like, oh man, as a guy who like does a lot of marriage counseling, I'm like, oh,
You're out of a job.
I'm out of a job. But actually what he said was most of it is worthless in the sense that couples will go to marriage therapy usually only if they actually already have some sense of hope for their marriage anyway. If they feel like we're just done, they're not going to go to marriage therapy. So it's not catching the people who really desperately need to be healed, usually. But the other thing is that it tends to be a lot of just kind of talk about your problems for a little bit, get a little bit of good advice, move forward, put it into practice for the next 6 months, and then just fall back into your normal habits. But what he said instead is the marriage therapy that's really effective is that which actually teaches skills that the couple can put into practice long term and keep doing. And he said the number one skill that he had learned was repair. Now, that's his kind of social research term for
Forgiveness.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
To repair the relationship, to bring it back together and to say, we got to heal from the hurts. Yeah. And he said that if you can learn how to practice repair, forgiveness, along with, and he often kind of touts that love and respect connection, if you can practice those things consistently, and that's the solution to 95% of your problems.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a sermon series Pastor Mike did on forgiveness. And the phrase that still probably sticks with all of us who were part of that was, let the stone alone. When someone has hurt you, and it can be your spouse, you want to have that stone right there to be able to throw it back at them.
Oh, yeah.
You hurt me. Remember when you did this? Yeah. Or you do this?
Yeah.
And he said, forgiveness is, someone has hurt me. I have a stone here that I could throw at them, but I'm going to let the stone alone.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking as I'm hearing you talk, like in forgiveness in a marriage, your spouse may hurt you, but forgiveness is, I'm not holding that against you, or
Yes.
I'm not going to bring it back up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have it in my back pocket for when you aren't treating me well. Remember when you did this?
Right.
I'm going to let the stone alone, and I'm going to leave it there.
But can we be honest? That's not that easy.
No, it's
like
absolutely,
we can talk about
hard.
it. Like, yeah, just leave the stone. It's no big
just
deal.
very
You hurt
hard.
me.
Just don't
No
pick
big
it
deal.
up. Come on.
It's a choice, but it was like, making
Yeah.
the intentional choice. And that just helped me just in my own life.
Yeah.
Knowing to have that image of forgiveness. I got to let the stone alone. I could throw this back, but Jesus could be throwing a lot of stones at me for my sins. And
so
I'm not going
that's
to do that.
What I've discovered for myself really helps me to practice forgiveness is to start by asking myself the question, how much has Jesus forgiven me for?
Yeah.
And to really focus for a moment on where have I failed here? What am I doing wrong? Not just to her, but also to just to the world around me, to the rest of creation, to the other image bearers of God who surround me, to God himself. Where have I gone wrong? And how much have I actually been forgiven for? And then I started saying this prayer to myself years ago where I would ask God, help me to see her the way you see her.
Yeah.
And that was a powerful prayer because I remember the first time I prayed it, it was like suddenly I had this almost like a divine vision of seeing my wife just sitting there in a chair as this little girl who's loved by her heavenly Father and who's just not perfect. And yet he's just like, I adore you anyway. I don't adore you less because you're not perfect. I've died for you. I've given you everything. This is what I'm giving to you. And when I could see her through those eyes, it really just filled me with compassion, right? And then I looked at the hurts that she'd caused me and I was like, whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
Like I've hurt her, she's hurt me. Can we just hit the reset button like on the Nintendo, the old Nintendo?
The old Nintendo,
you might not remember, but once upon a time there was this gray box. It had a reset button. You pressed it and it just started all
I do
over.
remember that. I was like in elementary school. It's okay.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Well. Feeling a little old here.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
But
about.
practically speaking, on that thread, right? You need to do some self-reflection is what I'm hearing for forgiveness. But what about all those couples that are just like that? It's still just not working. Like if I'm like, what if my heart is still like, I'm frustrated. We need to talk this out. Like it might not be something you can just like let go. What are practical things that they can do?
There's actually, I teach couples a process for forgiveness. And a lot of times if I have a couple who is coming to me for counseling, I will like literally walk them through each step, forcing them to say the steps with each other. And I have kind of 4 steps that I will walk them through. So if you say your husband's name is Jake, right? So say Jake has hurt you and he wants to come and he needs to apologize to you for that. And Jake needs to come and step 1 is for him to first of all just acknowledge the hurt. Like for him, before he even says I'm sorry, he needs to say, hey, Allie, I know that what I did really hurt you. And try to understand it, right? Maybe he can't understand it because there have been times I've literally had this conversation with my wife where I'm like, I know that what I did hurt you. I don't really know why. Yeah. But I know that it did.
But it hurt.
So, and sometimes she gets angry all over at me for that because she's like, I want you to understand why it hurt me.
How could you not understand?
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like, but I just don't.
Yes. Yep.
Because we just think differently.
Yep.
But for him to say, all right, I know that I hurt you and I know that what I did was hurtful. Then number 2 is actually to share, how do I plan to fix that? Like what am I going to do in the future that's different? So quite a few years ago, I went through kind of a season of life where I was really just struggling with anger issues. And I can talk about, at length about what was behind all of that. That doesn't matter. The issue was when we would fight, my temper would just rise very quickly. And it was a problem. And so I remember one time that I kind of realized I got to do something about this. And so when I went to my wife to apologize, I said, look, I'm going to go and I'm going to start doing some anger management classes because I need that. So that was reassuring her that whatever hurt I caused, I'm going to take a step to prevent that from happening in the future. Now, step 4 is then to actually communicate the apology. And I like to teach couples not to say the words, I'm sorry, because it's really easy to be like, I'm sorry, okay? Look, I said the words.
Doesn't feel very great.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, what do you want? More do you want from me? I said, I'm sorry. But if I say the words, I need you to forgive me, that's powerful, right?
Yeah.
Because I can't say those words flippantly. I can't be like, I need you to forgive me, all right? Like, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't even feel right.
Needs to be some sincerity about it.
There's some sincerity in the I need you to forgive me. But what I'm really doing is I'm placing myself in the other person's hands and saying, there's something broken and only you can fix it.
It's vulnerability.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And then number 4 is actually to myself let go of the thing, right? Like I did this, but I can't keep beating myself up over it. Because that's also something that I had struggled with for a long time where after I would hurt my wife, we'd apologize, she'd forgive me, we'd move past it, and I would just like walk around mopey, like, I'm just such a bad person. And she'd be like, can you just let go of it? I'd be like, okay.
And then you got to start the process of, I'm sorry, I'm going to do better at this.
I have to actually, please forgive me for not forgiving myself.
Yes.
I mean, and the buzzword is forgive yourself, which is fine. You could use it that way, but it's really just to let go of it.
Yeah.
So those are 4 steps that I teach people for asking for forgiveness. But then there's 4 steps for giving that forgiveness.
Yes.
And step 1 is really it's really they're a mirror of each other. So step 1 is to acknowledge the hurt that's been caused. To actually look at your spouse and say, yeah, what you did really hurt. I'm not okay with that. This kind of is bad. It feels bad.
So at that point, could you elaborate more on why you were hurt? Or does that like stir up all these extra things? Like, right? Because I think there are some people then that will go on a monologue about all of the ways. So like, is that the time to also share that? Or does that make it worse?
Be like, here's why it hurt.
Let me count the ways.
I have 17 bullet points.
Yes.
I mean, I think that you have to be wise as a person and look at the situation and ask, is this a time and a place to share those things? Maybe it is. It depends on your spouse, I think. I think that the challenge for a lot of guys in tense situations in relationships is to run away from the feelings of shame that they feel when they've done something wrong. And so my advice to guys is to stay present. Stay fully present in that conversation. And if she has to tell you, here's why it hurt, stick around for it, man. You might have to hear some hard things, but you got to stick around for it. But then my advice to wives, because wives, their tendency is going to be to expose all of the fears, because that's really what's happening. When somebody says, let me tell you why this hurt so much, it's actually, let me tell you why I'm scared. Mm-hmm. Right. And what happens between 2 women when a woman shares her fears is the other woman says, oh, honey, it's okay, and comes close and they connect. Right. But when a woman tells her husband all of her fears, he wants to run away. So he's got to stay present, and she's got to be at least compassionate to the fact that, hey, this really raises that stress level for him. And she needs to kind of be thoughtful about, how do I talk about this in a way that doesn't sound like it's accusing him or saying that he's the source of my fears. Right? But in a way that says, we're united. I need you to know that this hurt, but I also want you to know, to reaffirm the unity of the marriage at that point.
Yeah.
Does that help with that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So acknowledging that hurt, but giving yourself that permission to say, yeah, this thing you did really hurt me. Mm-hmm. And then number 2 is insisting that the other person do something about it and saying, look, there's a boundary here. I'm not going to let you just do this to me over and over again. This isn't okay with me, and things need to change. And so, like I said, when I was losing my temper, it was okay for my wife to say, listen, if you're going to lose your temper with me, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go get away, or you're going to leave, or one of us is going to leave the room, so that there's space between us, because we can't just be sitting here and having this shouting match at each other. It just doesn't work. So having that boundary. Then number 3 is to communicate forgiveness. And this is one where I think that couples really need to be trained, because what happens in American society, if I say I'm sorry to you, what do you say?
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
But if I have to go to my wife and apologize for something, it's not okay.
Yes.
Whatever it was not okay. And I don't want to hear her say it's okay. I want to hear her say the words, I forgive you. Right? And so I teach couples to say that. Say the words, I forgive you, which is incredibly vulnerable itself. Like you were talking about that vulnerability, right? Like it's vulnerable to say, I need you to forgive me. It's also really vulnerable to say, I forgive you, because what's happening is you're actually saying, I'm going to let this go.
I'm going to leave the stone alone.
Yeah. I'm going to leave the stone alone. And then step 4 is then to let the issue die. Right? To actually say, if I say I forgive you to my wife, I have to walk away from it and be like, this didn't happen anymore. Right? Like it's in the past. Now, I should be really clear, by the way, because I know somebody in the comments at some point is going to say this. We're talking about the kind of hurts that are like the common day-to-day, I've done something wrong, I've said something wrong, I said something hurtful, I didn't pay attention to your needs or your wants or whatever. What I'm not talking about is those like serious betrayals, serious dangerous hurts. Like if there's abuse or adultery or something like that, there's a much longer process of healing to go through, right? Correct. This what I've just talked through is for the You said something that just really hurt my feelings, or I asked you to take care of something and you just completely neglected it, or whatever, right? And that can be some of those bigger hurts, but like if there's a massive issue, we got to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I also tell people, be careful if you've got an abusive spouse and you need to leave for a while to be safe, like do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And don't treat forgiveness as I now ignore the danger that this person has posed to me.
Yeah.
I may have to say, until you change this behavior, until you change this issue, we're not going to be in the same house together because it's just not safe for me. And that's actually very biblical.
Mm-hmm.
Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians 7 is something that needs to happen sometimes. And so it's okay.
There's just so many like things there. My brain's like going so many different ways.
There's a lot of layers.
There's a lot of layers because there's so many different situations. And I think I like that you're applying a general principle across the board for no matter. Because I can see like you can get into a discussion with your spouse and it's like, did I really sin against you? Or did you just not hear my intentions and took it the wrong way? That goes back to communication.
Sure. Yeah.
There may not have been an actual sin that happened.
Yeah.
But we're just not on the right. You misunderstood me. That was not my intention whatsoever, but I didn't communicate that very well.
Right.
That gets into just the heart of what good communication looks
Absolutely.
like. So
yeah.
Maybe let's just talk about that. Like
sure.
I think I'll just say that from the husband side, you can speak from the wives side.
Yeah.
But from communication, what always just frustrates me just about wives and women, and maybe I'm making a generalization.
Be careful.
But it's that the women often want men to just read their minds. Like I shouldn't have to tell you what I want you to do. Or sometimes I've seen that and that it's just like, well, why didn't you do that? Well, I didn't know you wanted to do that. Well, why didn't you ask me to go out for dinner for a date night? Oh, I didn't know. I thought you wanted to be doing this. That whole mind reading thing from a men's perspective, sometimes it's like, just tell me how you feel.
Sure.
And so I know, and we can talk about it.
Yeah.
But from the women, it might be a completely different perspective.
No, I've
know.
had this conversation with my husband too.
I was
He's
gonna
just
say,
like,
do you
tell
expect
me.
do you expect your husband to read your mind, or not? Or
I have found myself doing that, not intentionally though. And typically Jake will have to remind me, he's like, Allie, I can't read your mind. You just need to tell me. And I'm happy to do whatever it is. But I always feel like, why should I have to tell you? You should just know, like, I want you to organize a date for us. And I don't want to have to tell you that I want you to organize a date for us. And so I think I think we find ourselves in this loop, but he's right. He can't, that's not how his brain works.
right. And why do you think he should just know that?
I don't know. I think our culture. I think you watch movies, all of these things, these men do these elaborate things for their women, and you're like, I want that.
And it makes you feel good when you see that. You're like, if I could have that, that would make me feel really good, right? So I think this is my theory on why this happens, because I do think it's true that there is a kind of the stereotype has some truth behind it. And I think this is why, because there was a study years ago, it was almost 10, 11 years ago. They did a study on men's and women's brains where they did like the electroencephalogram thing, and they had them go through this like cognitive tests while they're measuring the electrical activity on the brain. And they did a composite. They had like 1,000 women and 1,000 men, and they made a composite of the electrical activity in their brain doing this test. And the composite of the women's brain had all of the electrical activity was going back and forth like across the hemispheres. And the composite of the men's brain, all the activity was going front to back within each hemisphere. And
Interesting.
Now we don't fully understand how brains work. So isn't that really kind of funny actually?
Yeah.
God is great. God is so good.
Yeah, the brain is an
Here we are,
amazing.
2025. We're like creating artificial intelligence. We still don't actually know how the brain works.
Yes, I know.
But what we do know is that when you watch a human brain during like emotionally charged activity, there are certain parts that light up, and many of them are on the right hemisphere. And when somebody's doing logical and reasoning activities, more of the left hemisphere is lighting up, which implies that for the most part, your left side of your brain is kind of your logic reasoning side, and the right side is your emotional. Now doesn't hold entirely true, because there are models that show differences, but in general, that's what we see. So with a woman's brain, connecting the electrical activity across the hemispheres suggests that she doesn't separate reasoning from emotion. To put that another way, for a woman, something that is emotional is reasonable. And when she says that would feel very good. To her, that's just plain and simple logic. And so if my husband is a smart guy, this is what you might be thinking. Yes. If my husband's a smart guy and he loves me, there's no reason why he shouldn't want to date night with me. And he should think of this. This just makes sense, right? It's just reasonable.
Yeah.
But because of the way men's brains are organized, it suggests that they separate their emotion from their reasoning, which doesn't say that they don't have the emotions. They do. Mm-hmm. He's like, I love you. Certainly I love you. You're awesome. And also I have things to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he's not even connecting those dots. And it's not that he's ignorant of what she needs. It's just that he's like, I need to be told so that I can go to the, there's kind of this old men are waffles, women are spaghetti kind of idea, that we have different boxes in our brains as guys. And he's like, I need you to put date night into the things to do box for me because it's not in there.
Yeah.
And so that's what's going on there, right?
And sometimes I like that communication because as a guy, I like to know that. So my wife, once she told me, I would just love to get some flowers sometime. And so Ding. I would get her flowers. And then I'd get her, 3, 4, 5 weeks later, get her flowers again. And I do for a while. And then after a while, she's like, it's not really doing it for me anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And then she told me, what would be nice would be like a date night. You want to just plan one? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And that's for me, I would love to just make her happy.
Yes.
But I knew from knowing her that might change. It might look differently.
Yeah.
And I appreciated when she just communicated that to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
The to-do list is interesting. So my husband is a stay-at-home dad, which is amazing. But so he's home all day. And household chores and all of the things. And so I would be running out the door in the morning and I'd be like, hey, can you take care of these 3 things today? They're on my mind. Can you take care of them? I'd get home and they were done. And I'd be like, why didn't you get them done? And he'd be like, I totally forgot. I'm sorry. And I'm like, you literally sat here. Right? I had all of these reasons of why he didn't do it. And I needed to get over myself eventually. And in the morning now, he has a to-do list. He has a planner. And we sit down. He's like, what would you like me to get done today? Sure. And at first, I thought it was ridiculous. I'm like, I shouldn't have to be giving my husband a to-do list. But he wants to get it done. He just needed a process and a way to communicate that of tell me exactly what it is and I'm going to write it down.
Yeah.
And that has changed things dramatically for years now.
Yeah. Yeah. So clear communication, right? Yep. My wife often reminds me of this because they have to use this at the school where she teaches. Clear is kind.
Yep.
Being clear.
Clear is kind.
What you want. And this is, talking about communication skills. I mean, what we're really describing is just being assertive as a spouse. And assertiveness, sometimes we hear the word assertiveness and there's this negative connotation to it. Mm-hmm. Somebody who's assertive is the CEO walks around barking orders and telling people what to do. But in marriage, assertiveness is really just as simple as saying, here's what I need. Here's what I want. And so I often will train couples kind of in a communication exercise. I call it the I wish exercise, where I actually have them express what they want in the relationship to each other and then force them to reflect it to each other. So John, it might work this way where, what's something you would like more of in your relationship?
Oh, time at home, not running around being so busy to watch movies together or do something.
So you want to spend more time with Aaron at home.
Downtime. Yes.
Okay.
Downtime.
So you might say to Aaron, I would really like it if we could have more downtime at home together, to just be together. And then how would that make you feel if you had that with Aaron?
Finally relaxed and restful from the busyness of life.
So you would say, if that came true, then I would feel more relaxed and more recharged and closer to you.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would have you say that to Erin, and then she would have to say back to you, John, I heard you say that you would just like us to kind of cut some of the stuff out of the schedule so we can just spend more time at home together, and that would really make you just feel relaxed and recharged and close. And then, I would check in with you and be like, John, is that what you said? And you'd be like, yep. And then she's like, okay. But the power of that kind of communication exercise, right, is number one, by saying, I would like this. That's what a real assertiveness really is simply taking ownership for what you want and then expressing it clearly so the other person knows. And then the reflection side, I heard you, the power of that is that you're not actually agreeing to anything. Like the way that I just played that out, Erin doesn't necessarily have to say, I'm willing to do that for you, John. She just says, I heard you say that you want this. But if you assume your spouse's goodwill, assume that they actually want to serve you, then if they know what you want, then they're going to try to do something about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, which lands maybe in this episode, because we're really getting a lot of good conversation in here, but maybe to kind of land that plane, I've heard it said, if you want a great marriage, try and outserve each other. Not in a competitive way, but ask yourself, how can I make my spouse's day better?
Yeah.
What can I do to bring joy to their lives, to lift them up, to help them, to encourage them? And if both people are doing that, not if one person is doing that, it's okay, good. But if both people are actively doing that, your marriage could just skyrocket if you're both intentionally thinking about that each day.
Yeah. And I think that couples want that. I mean, you want to serve your husband wants to serve you, but it's that question, do I know what to do? Right. And so how do I know how to serve my spouse? How do I know, do you know how to serve Erin? Do you know what she wants the most, right? Do you know what would make her feel the most blessed today? So I like to suggest this. If couples are watching, this is a great conversation that they can have. 3 questions at the end of the day. Question number 1, what was something good about our relationship today? Just open up the opportunity to just say something positive to each other, because we can kind of forget the importance of saying something positive to our spouse. Like, hey, you actually are kind of an awesome person and there's a reason I married you. That's a good thing to say to each other. So to remind each other of that every day. What's something good about our relationship today? And then question number 2 is a little bit harder, but it's what wasn't so great about our relationship today? Like what didn't go well between us? Was it that, Jake didn't get the stuff done? Was it that Erin was running around too much? You get to say those things.
Yeah, and be ready to receive that.
And be ready to receive
heart.
it. When I ask that question, what was not so great about a relationship today? When I ask that of my wife, if Nikki's going to tell me something hard, I'm opening that door. I'm saying, hey, tell me something that I don't want to hear.
That I'm not going to want to hear.
Because that's the only way I can change, right? And then question number 3 is, how can I help? Which just invites this assertiveness conversation, like, tell me what you want. But how can I help just says, what's something I can do tomorrow that would be really beneficial to you? And then that gives me the opportunity to outserve, like you said. That I now know some steps I can take to make this other person feel like, hey, I'm on your side, right? We're in each other's corner.
I love that. I'm going to use that tonight. I'm going to see how it goes. But that is all we have time for in this episode. We are going to be back with Brandon for another one. I want to talk more about communication, because I think all of those things are great, but to even get to that point, you have to be comfortable saying that. And I've struggled with that. I know other couples, I know I've struggled even just communicating that. So I want to dive more into that in our next episode. But if you have any questions or topics that you'd like to submit, it is in the description box. And also, don't forget to like and share and do all of the things. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Light Talks. We will see you next time.